Elias was a man of faith, a preacher in a small southern town, where faith was the only thing keeping people together. It was the Prohibition era, a time when laws against alcohol had forced people into secret corners of the world's speakeasies and underground hideouts to drown their sorrows. For Elias, it wasn't just about keeping his flock away from sin, it was about keeping himself from temptation. Beneath his righteous exterior lay a man haunted by his past and his growing doubts about the very God he served. One night, as the moon hung low and the streets were quiet, Elias found himself drawn to the outskirts of town. A strange feeling tugged at him, as though something or someone was calling him. He came across a dilapidated church, one that hadn't been used in decades. Its stained glass windows were cracked, but they glowed faintly in the moonlight, casting eerie patterns on the ground. Inside, the air was thick, almost suffocating, and a faint whisper seemed to echo off the crumbling walls. That's when he met the stranger. Dressed in a dark suit that seemed both modern and ancient, the man's presence was magnetic. His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, as he spoke to Elias about the burdens he carried. "You preach of salvation," the stranger said, "but do you truly believe in it? Or are you just as lost as the souls you claim to save?" Elias was taken aback but couldn't bring himself to leave. The stranger seemed to know things about him, things no one could have known. It was as though he had been watching Elias his entire life. The stranger extended his hand, offering Elias something he couldn't quite understand at first: freedom. Not freedom from sin or guilt, but freedom from mortality itself. "You could be so much more," the stranger whispered. "You could be eternal." At first, Elias resisted. The idea was blasphemous, an affront to everything he believed in. But the stranger was persistent, and over time, Elias found himself drawn back to the abandoned church, night after night. Each time, the stranger revealed more of the world Elias had never known, a world where the rules of life and death no longer applied. As the nights turned into weeks, Elias began to change. His sermons grew darker, filled with warnings of a reckoning that no one could escape. His congregation started to dwindle, fearful of the man who once gave them hope. But Elias didn't care. He had tasted something forbidden, and it had awakened a hunger inside him that couldn't be ignored. The transformation wasn't immediate. It started with small things: an increased sensitivity to light, an aversion to the smell of garlic. Then came the dreams, visions of blood and shadows, of faces he didn't recognize but somehow knew. And finally, the hunger. It was unlike anything Elias had ever felt before, a gnawing emptiness that no food or drink could satisfy. When Elias finally gave in, the first taste of blood was both horrifying and exhilarating. It was as though a fire had been lit within him, burning away all the doubts and fears that had plagued him for so long. But with that fire came a darkness he couldn't control. The more he fed, the more he lost himself, until the man he once was became little more than a distant memory. As Elias embraced his new identity, he began to uncover the truth about the stranger who had turned him. This wasn't just a chance encounter, it was part of a larger plan, one that had been set in motion long before Elias was even born. The stranger was no ordinary vampire, he was a creature of ancient power, tied to a secret society that had manipulated humanity for centuries. This society, known only as the Order, had its roots in the darkest corners of history. They were the puppet masters behind wars, plagues, and every other catastrophe that had befallen mankind. Their goal was simple: to create a world where they ruled supreme, feeding off the chaos and despair they orchestrated. Elias was to be their pawn, a means to an end. But as he delved deeper into the Order's secrets, he realized that he had the power to fight back. The question was, did he want to? The hunger that consumed him was relentless, and the thought of going back to his old life seemed impossible. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small part of his humanity remained, a part that refused to be extinguished. The climax of Elias's journey is a battle not just of blood and power, but of will and identity. As he faces off against the stranger and the Order, he must decide what kind of monster he wants to be. Can he use the darkness within him to fight for the light, or will he succumb completely to the very forces he sought to destroy?